Now, when you think of the Afghan economy, what comes to mind? Well, besides opium production and narcotics trafficking. Well, according to the United States and also Afghan officials, Afghanistan could eventually become one of the most important mining centers in the world. Now, this after a story in the New York Times says that the United States has discovered nearly $1 trillion worth of mineral deposits in the war-torn nation. But are these findings really new information, or did other nations, including the United States, know about this for years? And also, what could the recent reports mean for the future of Afghanistan? Well, joining me with more, investigative journalist Webster Tarpley. So, Webster, the headlines here, at least in the New York Times piece, read that, this discovery goes far beyond any previously known reserves. But even in that New York Times article, they go on to say that, there were these charts, this documentation that was there for decades, starting with the Soviets there, right, in the 80s, and then geologists back there in 2004, again in 2006, in 2007, apparently more reports were published. They say it sort of collected dust. They sat on this for a few years. So talk about the timing here. I mean, why did this article come out now? Well,
as you correctly say, there's nothing new here. They have discovered nothing. The discoveries, if there were some, were made by the Soviets during the 1980s. There's a World Bank report from 2004 that has all of this stuff. At the time of Karzai coming here to Washington about a month ago with Hillary Clinton meeting, there was a bunch of talk about the mineral wealth of Afghanistan. So it's a very important thing, but it's not new. So the question is, what are we dealing with here? This is a planted story in the New York Times by James Risen, who has chosen to become the stenographer of people in the Pentagon.
Well, why would he do that? I mean, what is in it for the New York Times? I mean, I've heard people say this, but what does the New York Times have anything to do with this? I mean, again, what's in it for them?
The New York Times is, let's say, politically available for all kinds of projects. Now, in this case, why don't we look at the article? Who is the only top U.S. official mentioned in the article? It's General David Petraeus, the commander of the CENTCOM, the Central Command. Now, people in Washington know that he is an active candidate for president. He is being groomed by the neocon faction of the Republican Party. He was made American Enterprise Institute Man of the Year. He's got Max Boot. He's got the Kagan family. He's got Frank Gaffney.
Well, he hasn't come out and said that, but he was quoted as saying, let's get back to this issue, not necessarily Petraeus, but he did say that there's stunning potential here.
Stunning potential. So basically, it's a way of running for president, you might say.
Well, what does that have to do with the...
Don't go into the primaries. What he's saying is, make me president, and we can exploit this wealth, whereas with Obama the wimp, he's going to leave. He's going to start pulling out in 1 year. So it's a way to make the following appeal.
But wait a second. I mean, we have Barack Obama in power now, and according to this report, the Pentagon task force has already started sort of reaching out to companies, trying to take advantage of people who have expertise in mining. So I'm not sure that this has too much to do with the administration. But Webster, I do want to touch on the point that, they found these things in the southern and eastern regions of Afghanistan. This is where a lot of the violence takes place. We can't forget, number one, there's a war here right now. So bring that into the equation also.
The purpose of the planted story is, at the higher level, as you say, is to organize a consensus to keep the war going. It basically says to interest groups in the United States, the corporate world, Wall Street, mineral companies, mining companies, we should stay. And it also makes very clear, if you don't stay, the Chinese will get everything. The Chinese have already gotten a copper mine, and they're going to feast on all this wealth.
Well, China is definitely the
other level, though, is also the European NATO partners, right? We have the new conservative government in Britain. And Cameron was just in Afghanistan, and he said, we're going to get out of here as soon as we can. In Poland, they've demanded an exit strategy. In Germany, 70% of the people are completely fed up with this. So it's also an appeal to the NATO partners, stay. Remember the use of military contracts in Iraq? France and Germany got none, and the people who joined in got some. So it's basically saying, we'll give you a piece of the action. Be you a U.S. interest group or a NATO partner now thinking of leaving. But
now officials are saying, hey, this is going to be the new backbone of the Afghan economy. But let's not forget, you don't build a mining industry overnight. I mean, this stuff could take decades. They have no expertise.
Of course not. These are neocon promises. Petraeus is now the head of the war party. He's the head of the neocon faction, or their figurehead. Remember in Iraq, the neocons said, we can loot the oil of Iraq and pay for the whole war and get rich in the process and control the price of oil worldwide. All stories. And in this case, there's obviously some real mineral wealth there, but the idea that the U.S. is going to cash in on it, I think, is quite far-fetched. The main content is, don't start pulling out in 1 year. Stay, fight the war, have a prolonged war, and you can get rich in the process.
Well, the other interesting thing that this article points out is that, look, this could create more incentives for the Taliban to say, hey, we have these resources, we have these minerals, let's keep on fighting, because there's no way that we can lose control of this country, especially with these findings, right? So it goes both ways.
Naturally, the Taliban, I think, are going to keep fighting. The Taliban are winning right now, right? The other thing is there's a great deal of defeatism, not only in NATO, but also here inside the United States. The month of June has been disastrous, right? The casualty rates are very, very high. It's about as bad as any month in Iraq. And then you've also got other people who are flaking off, right? Charlie Rangel from Harlem has said Obama is comparable to Bush and Cheney in his lies about these wars. So there's a great deal of disaffection. So the idea is give people some pie in the sky, and maybe you can keep the war going for a little bit longer. I think it's likely to fail. But that's what this planted story, I think, is designed to do.
It's a very interesting story, and we're certainly we're going to continue to follow it here. Webster Tarpley, investigative journalist there for us. Good to have your analysis.